Okay, so I spent a good amount of this video praising the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. However, would you believe me when I said that that's not actually my favourite DreamWorks franchise? And before anyone asks, neither is the Shrek franchise because Shrek the Turd exists. My favourite DreamWorks franchise is actually Kung Fu Panda. I just love these movies so much. All of them. Even the latter ones are really enjoyable for me despite being significantly weaker. Yes, I am one of the 10 people who enjoyed the fourth film in spite of its many flaws. However, the first two films are the primary place where my love is directed towards, and honestly, these two films were probably the films I was most looking forward to rewatching this marathon. They are just so cool and funny and exciting and emotional at many points, and I can't get enough of them. But that does lead me on to the age-old question which has been long debated since the days of the ancient Chinese scholars. Which Kung Fu Panda film do I prefer? 1 or 2? Well, I obviously adore both of them. But the film which I find slightly weaker and we'll talk about now is the first one. Yep, I prefer the sequel to the original, and we'll talk about Kung Fu Panda 2 a little bit later. For now though, I'll talk about the slightly weaker but still absolutely phenomenal Kung Fu Panda 1, which is quite possibly the greatest film which could possibly be made from a title and premise so ridiculous. I mean, come on. A fat panda doing kung fu is a silly idea, and if I didn't know any better, I'd assume that this movie was some form of generic kid slop with no artistry or value to it whatsoever, and oh my god, this movie is actually the real deal. Yeah, I think the immediate thing to praise about Kung Fu Panda is the fact that it's actually a real martial arts movie first and foremost, and a goofy family comedy second. It's a movie which, just like other martial arts movies, prioritizes its action and its messages over everything else, which means that it has a clear level of respect for its inspirations. This movie is not a parody at all. It is simply a comedic take on a pre-existing genre, just like Rango was for the western genre. In order to see how respectable this movie is, let's start by talking about the action. Holy shit, these fight scenes are awesome! Like, seriously, these are some of the most well choreographed and exciting action scenes I have seen from any film, even outside of animation. In fact, dare I say, it's the best action from Western media in the 2000s? Remember, this was the decade where action films constantly used shaky cams and jump cuts to nauseating effect, which means that these smooth looking, visually appealing, easy to follow along action scenes were way better by comparison. Everything from the prison escape, to the bridge fight, to the final fight between Shifu and Tai Lung are all awesome. You feel every hit, the colours absolutely pop, and all of the settings feel different and unique from not just each other, but from any other movie. However, alongside the stellar direction and cinematography, the action scenes are also able to stand out thanks to the stellar animation. Now, I don't know how controversial of a statement this is to say, but I'm just gonna say it. The Kung Fu Panda movies are some of the best looking CG movies to come out pre-Spider-Verse. Seriously, they look incredible and, most importantly, they hold up really well. There is not a single frame of this movie which looks like it comes from 2008. And to think, this is the weakest looking Kung Fu Panda movie. Somehow, they get more visually appealing from here. However, the main reason for why this film works so well as a martial arts movie is thanks to its messages, which really pay homage to Chinese culture and respect the art of Kung Fu. Now, I'm not Chinese, so I'm not experienced enough to really talk too much about the cultural aspects of this film with my own points, so instead I'm just going to parrot what I've heard other people say. Basically, this film does something interesting by initially appearing to follow the Western interpretation of Kung Fu, which is all about the fighting, but then surprises its audience by representing what Kung Fu really means at its core. Kung Fu is all about expressing what's on the inside, and this, in turn, is what helps to give the wielder strength which can then be used for things like fighting or for inner peace. Po doesn't save the day in this movie because he's an epic fighter, he succeeds because he's able to use what makes him special in order to defeat Tai Lung. This idea that there is speciality to every individual is a brilliant one which really respects the art of Kung Fu. In fact, this movie as a whole was so good at portraying Chinese culture that it caused a national debate in China all about why an American-made movie portrayed the culture better than Chinese-made movies at the time. No, I'm not joking about that. Look it up. However, alongside this message of self-expression and fulfillment fitting culturally, it is also, simply put, a great message for any audience member to learn. Not to mention, Po's self-expression and his kung fu abilities also aids the narrative, as it makes it more believable that he is actually able to defeat Tai Lung in the end. Po takes a more unconventional approach to kung fu in comparison to Tai Lung's traditional approach, and that is what ends up throwing Tai Lung off, which ends up leading to his defeat. Once again, it's all just brilliant, and it's a perfect way to blend respect for a culture with a brilliant story with a lot to say for anyone. Seriously, this film has so much to say even outside of its kung fu heritage. A major aspect of the movie is the theme of imposter syndrome, with Po feeling like he doesn't belong in the Jade Palace alongside the Furious Five. In fact, his internal fears are even directly spat back at him by Tigress, who straight up calls him a disgrace to kung fu. However, Po is nonetheless an admirable figure as he keeps pushing past his doubts and remaining optimistic, which is what ultimately allows him to prove Shifu and the Five wrong as he becomes a Kung Fu master. Once again, it's a brilliant and inspiring message, and if you don't believe me that this is a fantastic message told in a masterful way, well, I watched scenes from this movie in a school assembly once because the teachers thought that was a great way to show us all the effects of bullying and how to move past doubts. So yeah, if school teachers use this movie as a positive example, then it must be good. The best part of that little anecdote, by the way, is the fact that it was a year 12 assembly, so everyone was between the ages of 16 and 17, and no one complained about how we were being shown clips from a kids movie. That's how respected Kung Fu Panda is. Anyway, alongside Po, we've also got Shifu, who has his own lessons to learn which lend themselves to even more messages. The main things that Shifu has to grapple with in this movie are his failures, most importantly, the way that he failed Tai Lung. He trained Tai Lung and filled his head with dreams of greatness, which means that when they didn't come to pass, Tai Lung snapped and acted out. Shifu pushed Tai Lung to his limits for, ultimately, no reason, and his failure was what sent Tai Lung down his dark path. He's tried to run away and bury his mistakes, but by the end of the film, he owns up to it. It's such a powerful confession of wrongdoing that he even catches Tai Lung off guard in a brilliant scene where he nearly reconsiders going back to the light, before eventually snapping back into aggression. Nonetheless, despite Tai Lung being too far gone for now, Shifu is still able to find inner peace himself by the end of the film. As great as Po's journey in this movie is, I feel like the real heart here comes from Shifu and Tai Lung's relationship. Side note, but I just want to say that Tai Lung is one of DreamWorks' best villains. He's intimidating as hell and damn capable, but he's also got an emotional side to him which equally doesn't undercut his threat. He really does show us that a villain can be complex, interesting and sympathetic, while still being, you know, a villain who is evil and memorable. Take notes, Disney. I mean, I know he got redeemed and everything in the 4th movie, but whatever, my point still stands. Honestly, Tai Lung is still my favourite Kung Fu Panda villain, largely because of the more emotional side to him, although we'll definitely talk about Lord Shen later, don't you worry. Anyway, back to Shifu's failures. I thought it was great to see him grow and adapt from his failings as he teaches Po. He realizes that he needs to change his teaching methods, and so, as a result, teaches Po in a way that Po can understand. Once again, this is a great message for the audience all about how different people learn in different ways and so need to be taught accordingly. I think that overall, the messages with Shifu work especially well alongside Po's messages because it means that the film has something to say to all audiences. Kids will enjoy Po's optimism and awesomeness, whilst us depressed teens will relate to his feelings of self-doubt. Meanwhile, adults will connect with Shifu's journey of accepting parental mistakes and learning the best ways to teach and nurture someone. And to think, these aren't the only messages from this film, as there's also the wise, philosophical lessons from the greatest character from this franchise, Master Oogway. I love this turtle so much, and his famous quotes will forever live rent-free in my head because they are genuinely really good quotes. In fact, the line about how one often meets his destiny on the path he takes to avoid it is especially important to this franchise as it directly ties into multiple plot points such as Tai Lung's escape, which only happened because Shifu sent a bird to make sure that he wouldn't escape. Furthermore, it also directly ties into the themes of the second movie, but I'll discuss that later. Although whilst Oogway is definitely wise, he's also easily the funniest character in this movie.
Who is worthy to be trusted with the secret to limitless power, to become the Dragon Warrior? I don't know.
God, there's just so much to love here, and I've got so much more that I can say. Although, I'll say some of my points about the other characters like the Furious Five and Mr. Ping for when I talk about the second movie, as they are a bit more prevalent there. For now though, I want to talk about the direction and animation again, as I really like the way it was stylized even outside of the action scenes. The training montage was presented and edited in such a cool and unique way, and I've always loved these 2D animated sequences from this franchise, such as with the opening dream sequence here. And alongside the style, the colours always pop and help many scenes to stand out. The animation also complements the music, which, as you would now expect from a Hans Zimmer score, is absolutely outstanding. These two aspects can help to make simple scenes such as Oogway's ascension absolutely mesmerizing to the point that the scene gave me so many goosebumps. And finally, I want to talk about the humour. This is, simply put, a really funny movie with not that many jokes which miss for me. Po's naivety is always hilarious and Jack Black really adds so much to the line delivery, the physical humour like during the failed training is really strong, and, once again, Master Oogway is the GOAT. Okay, I will admit that I do feel like some of the humour in the climax undercuts Tai Lung's presence somewhat, and it does kinda clash with the emotional fight with Shifu immediately beforehand, but that's really my only major flaw with the humour, and with the film as a whole really. Overall though, Kung Fu Panda is just a shockingly amazing movie which had no right to be as good as it was considering what its premise is. But thank God this movie is amazing as I love it to bits and I will never tire of rewatching it. I've always loved this movie, but on this latest rewatch, I was more engrossed and emotionally invested than I ever was before, and I can see this feeling growing even further on future rewatches. It is just a bona fide banger in every way which respects its audience and the art of Kung Fu. And somehow, it's not the best Kung Fu Panda movie. Before we talk about the sequel though, we've got a load of other films we need to discuss first.